My name is Patricia. I train in Spain, in a city called Pamplona, and I came to London because I needed a new challenge in my life.
My name is Farid. I trained in the University of Greenwich. My parents are originally from Syria, and I stayed in London for just better job opportunities.
My name is Sho. I'm trained in London, but originally came from Japan. And I came to London as it's great for universities here.
My name is Anna. I trained in Poznan in Poland. I came to London for experience.
My name is Jonas Lenzer. I trained in Aachen and I came to London for work.
My name is Eloise and I trained in Rennes in Brittany in France, and I came to London for love.
My name is Ivan. I'm trained in London, actually. I'm originally from Bulgaria. Came here when I was 13. And I have stayed in London because I like it and I feel challenged, most of all.
My name is Roman. I trained in Barcelona. I came to London for the amazing opportunities that the city offers in architecture.
My name is Nina. I trained in France, in Nantes, Brittany, and I came to London for working, actually.
My name is Sam Skogstad. I'm from Wellington in New Zealand and studied in Wellington in New Zealand, and then spent 4 years after that working in Auckland before coming to London.
So when I first came to London, I had a very strong sense of place, and it felt like one big city has congregated from different villages, and these different villages have kind of created this common culture, which was very interesting to me. And the city itself doesn't feel like one strong identity. It's a lot of identities kind of coming together.
I think it's the experimentation. There is no really PLU as we have in France. It's like there is rules, each building have to respect the rules, and here it's like a melting pot of everything, big tower or small houses with garden. So I think that's what really impressed me when I arrived in London.
The biggest thing for me was there was a lot of kind of parks and places where you can kind of rest, and I think the architecture is completely different compared to Japan in general.
What I first noticed in difference from my hometown was probably the scale of the city and the scale of the projects.
The hustle and bustle, the constant, everything is everywhere.
Before coming to London, I was working in Shanghai, in China, and I think I worked on very large-scale project in China, and coming to London, this one is large-scale project, but almost it will be a small-scale project in China.
In Japan, they used to use a lot of timber construction, and that's becoming more and more popular in Japan too, as it's much nicer material to work with and to live in than concrete, and something that in London and this office in general likes using timber and CLT. And I think if there's more Japanese architects who knows how to use timber, and carpenters who might be able to come over to experience and to share their knowledge in this country.
dRMM is taking a lot of care of the spaces and its materiality, which is very important.
There's a vibrancy and I guess kind of getting all the different perspectives and kind of different backgrounds. I think that does play out in terms of, I guess you're going to get an interesting approaches to the kind of standard typologies.
So I love kind of this idea of being surrounded by art. I'm quite brave in some ways.
They're not conservative buildings. You know, you see a lot of architecture and it's very nice and it you know, it sits well and it sits very happily in its context. But I think dRMM kind of, there's that surprise and delight and interest that you, I guess that brings from people coming in who've got a completely different approach to how you might address, you know, that street or that context or that neighbouring building.
Going to Hastings Pier was the reason why I got excited about architecture. The big lesson that was learned, how to positively incorporate the community spirit within the project.
I think it's about bringing those different cultures together and different ideas which don't necessarily have one common culture. I think that's a very healthy attitude towards design, towards placemaking.
You know, each country has its specific way of dealing with architecture and teaching architecture too. Like, for instance, in Brussels, it was all about being artistic and creating beautiful spaces, and it was all about the light and the volumetry and the impression that it gives you. And in Rome, for instance, it was all about relationship with history, obviously, because they have so much, beautiful building from the past that they have to, you know, conserve and work hard on them. In Spain, it was all technical. So how do you build a bridge, and how do you calculate the structure, and how do you design, you know, a concrete foundation and stuff like that. So every one of those people coming from abroad has a very distinctive way of dealing with architecture. And when you put them all together in a studio, it's very funny because everyone has its own little world and, you know, definition of architecture, and they all bring something different to the plate.
I would say that I'm learning a lot about management, I would say, to bring the design into true life, and the importance also of the relation in UK with the client, the direct relation with the client, because maybe in Spain, for example, I feel it's more what always the architect says, and he is more about collaboration in a design team.
My first project I did in London was Wandsworth Street, which was the pilot project for the whole Elephant and Castle regeneration. And what was very interesting for me coming to London, starting on a project on a site which has been bombed and never redeveloped after the war, I spoke a lot to local residents, trying to understand how they live and how they see London. And Trafalgar Place really tries to reconnect to pre-war history of the place, reinstating street patterns and reinstating connectivity through the plot, but also linking residents of the estate and of the area into the new redevelopment of Elephant and Castle. And that is quite interesting, and that's what I think is the key to successful inner London architecture and regeneration, is the placemaking, that people actually understand where they live and they like where they live, and we give as much space to back to the public, have public realm which is accessible and enjoyable for everyone.